Welcome to another episode in this FPS tutorial series. In this episode we'll look at how to create this enemy which I can shoot. And if I shoot them enough they die, like that. And then in the next episode we'll go further by actually making it shoot you and walk around. So let's get started. So what we'll start off by doing is copying the player, because the enemy is going to be very similar. So I've just copied it and moved it down here. Then I'll call it enemy and I'll set the tag to untagged. Then I'll remove the player input, the player movement, player look and the player shooting. And then I will also delete this. So it's just this which is left. Then I'll just move it over here. I'll now right click on the enemy, go to 3D object and choose a cube. So I'll create some eyes for the enemy and it will be on the red axis right here. So in this direction, so the X plus direction. So what I'll do is call it eyes. I'll remove the box collider. Then I'll set the scale to a 0.3, a 0.1 and a 0.7 and I'll move it over here and a bit up like that. So now we have some eyes right here and let's add some colors to this. So let's go to assets, go to materials and let's right click, create material and I'll call this one enemy eye matte and I'll make that a red. Then I'll drag it onto the eyes right there. Then I'll right click again and create another material called enemy matte, which will just be for the body, and I'll make that a darker red, something like that. Then lastly I'll create another material which I will call enemy hit matte, which will just be white, which we will use when we shoot the enemy. It will just blink this material. Now we also need our enemy to hold a gun, so I'll go to assets, then go to prefabs and I'll drag the AR right here onto the enemy. Then I'll remove the gun script right here and I'll rotate it on the y-axis by 180 so it's in the right direction. Then I'll put it over here, maybe something like that. Yeah, I think that looks fine. I'll right click, go to prefab and do unpack completely, which makes sure that it's not a prefab anymore. So it's not connected to this one in any way. Now let's go to assets and go to scripts. Well, we'll create an enemy script, so right click, create mono behavior script called enemy. Now open that up. In here we'll delete the update function and this comment, and we'll also be using system.collections because we're going to be using a coroutine a little later. But we'll add some variables. First we'll add a public int called health, which I will set to 100, so this will be the health of the enemy. Then I'll add a private rigid body called RB, and I'll set RB in the start function with getComponent rigid body. Then I'll create a private void on collision enter, where we will check if collision.gameObject.tag equals damage. And the reason we're checking for damage is because if we just go into Unity real quick, go to assets, prefabs and choose our rifle bullet, I'll set the tag up here, click add tag and set it to damage. So spelled exactly the same way. Then go to rifle bullet and assign it right there. Now back in our script, we have essentially now checked if we hit damage, which is the bullet. And if so, we'll do health minus equals 10, so it loses 10 health. And then we'll do if health is below 0 or equal to 0 actually, well then the enemy will die. So let's create die function right under. So we'll do void die, very simple, where we will do rb.freeze rotation equals false, so now it can fall over basically. Then I'll also do transform.rotation equals quaternion.euler, where I'll input transform.rotation.x, transform.rotation.y, transform.rotation.z plus 5 or something like that. So I just add 5 so it's a bit off center and it will fall over, if that makes sense. And then I'll just do this.enabled equals false, so this enemy script is no longer active. And let's now test this out real quick. So go back into Unity, go to scenes, click on the enemy and click on add component. I'll search on enemy and set it to enemy. Then let's click play. Let's take a gun and shoot it. Oh shit, it's being moved. Let's just stop the game, go to prefabs and go to the bullet right here and set the mass of the rigid body right here to 0.0001, something very low, so it doesn't really affect the physics. Then go back to assets and start the game, and let's take a gun and shoot. And yep, after a while it falls over and dies. So stop the game again and let's now add so it blinks when we shoot it, so we can actually see that we've damaged it. So in here we'll add an eye enumerator called blink, and at the top up here we will add a public material called hit matte, and under the rigid body we'll add a private renderer called rend and a private material called original material. Rend we will set here, so we'll do rend equals get component renderer, and original material will be equal to rend.material, so that we can go back to the original material after we've done the blinking. So down here in the blink function, we'll do rend.material equals hit mat. Then we will wait 0.1 second, so we'll do yield return new wait for seconds, where we'll input 0.1f, and then we will set it back to the original material. So we'll do rend.material equals original material. Then we need to call the blink somewhere, and I'll do that in an else statement right here. So if the enemy is not dead, well then we will blink. But we need to do start coroutine, where we'll input blink, because that's a coroutine. Let's now head back into Unity. Let's click on the enemy, scroll down, and we have this hit mat we need to assign, so click right there and set it to enemy hit. And let's now hit play. And let's now try to shoot the enemy. Yep. And oops, there's a problem, you can see it goes back up. So let's fix that real quick. So the reason that happens even though we've done this.enabled equals false is because that on collision enter will still trigger. It's only other kinds of things like the start function, the update function and so on that won't trigger. So we'll just do up here if this.enabled and add an exclamation mark so it's not enabled, and then we'll return. So if it's not enabled, we'll just return. Let's test one more time. Hit play and try to shoot. Yep, and if we shoot now, it won't go back up. Perfect. So in the next episode, we'll look at how to make the enemy walk around and shoot you, where it will have different states, for example a chase state or a fleeing state or a patrolling state and so on. So stay tuned for that. And also, I know I keep saying this in every single episode about my community, but if you haven't checked it out, just check it out. You can get a 7-day free trial, so it's literally risk-free. But yeah, have an amazing day.